There's a moment in history when people stopped waiting for promises, when entire neighborhoods, tired, hungry, and ignored, decided they couldn't wait anymore. When people looked around and realized that no one was coming to save them, not the politicians, not the police, not the system. Out of that frustration came something powerful and dangerous, something the government didn't plan and couldn't control. It was called the Secret Black Government America Erased, a movement that didn't wear suits but hoodies, that didn't meet in boardrooms but in church basements and community centers. It wasn't built on speeches, it was built on action. They didn't wait for help, they became the help. It wasn't made of marble or gold, it rose from the streets, feeding kids, treating the sick, protecting the weak, a government by the people, for the people, until the real one decided it had gone too far. And here's the question: if they could erase that kind of power once, what makes us think they wouldn't do it again? Imagine this, it's 1968. The world is on fire. The headlines talk about riots, chaos, and fear. But behind the noise, something different is happening. In Oakland, California, a group of young men and women, most of them still in their 20s, are serving breakfast to children before school. Pancakes, eggs, milk. Simple food, but for many kids, it's the only meal they'll eat all day. These weren't politicians or millionaires. They were college students, factory workers, single mothers, and veterans. Their mission: feed their community, protect their people, tell the truth. They called themselves the Black Panthers, and they became what many would later call the hidden black government. While the US government debated poverty from air-conditioned offices, the Panthers solved it with pots, pans, and purpose. This wasn't rebellion, it was responsibility. Huey Newton once said, "The power of the people is greater than the man in office." And they believed that to their core. They started what they call survival programs. Because for black families back then, survival itself was political. The first program was the free breakfast for children. It began in a small church basement. There were no sponsors, no donations from big companies, just volunteers, food, and faith. Within a year, it spread like wildfire. Chicago, Detroit, New York, San Francisco. By 1969, the Panthers were feeding more than 50,000 children every morning. In some neighborhoods, the school buses waited outside the breakfast lines because every child knew, before class, you eat with the Panthers. They called it survival, but what they were really building was power, built on three things every human deserves: food, healthcare, freedom. Parents who had been invisible to the system came to watch their kids eat with dignity. For the first time, they saw leadership that looked like them, cared like them, and stood beside them. And those kids, they grew up knowing that community isn't charity, it's power. Let's look at the contrast. In 1969, the US government spent $77 billion on the Vietnam War. That same year, the Panthers fed thousands of children with pocket change and borrowed kitchens. When hospitals refused to treat black patients, the Panthers opened free clinics, 13 across the country. They offered checkups, dental care, and blood tests for sickle cell anemia, a disease almost no one else cared to research. They even trained volunteers in first aid and basic medical care. If someone was injured by police or couldn't afford treatment, they came to the Panthers. And when elderly people had no way to get groceries or go to the doctor, the Panthers started a free transportation program. Vans driven by volunteers who refused to let their elders be forgotten. They ran tutoring centers for kids, drug rehab programs for addicts, and legal aid offices for those unfairly arrested. They even gave away free shoes, food bags, and coats during the winter. That's not chaos. That's community. That's the hidden black government, building what the real government claimed was impossible. But power never likes competition. As the movement grew, the FBI watched closely. J. Edgar Hoover called the Panthers the greatest internal threat to the United States. Not because of guns, but because of unity. He feared what he called a black messiah, someone who could bring people together across race and class. So they created a secret operation called COINTELPRO. The mission? Infiltrate, divide, and destroy. They planted informants, spread rumors, and sent fake letters between leaders to create distrust. They raided homes and community offices. They arrested organizers on false charges. And when that wasn't enough, they used the media, turning the Panthers' good deeds into stories of fear and violence. Imagine this: a headline showing men with leather jackets and guns, but not the kitchen full of children eating breakfast. A photo of a protest, but not the clinic down the street treating the sick. They didn't just attack the people, they attacked the image. Because feeding people was dangerous, healing people was dangerous, teaching freedom was the ultimate threat. Food, healthcare, and freedom. That was the revolution. And for a while, it worked. Ask most people today what they know about the Black Panthers, and you'll hear. Weren't they violent? Few know they ran over 60 community programs across America. Few know that their newspaper reached hundreds of thousands every week. Few know that they organized voter registration drives, after-school programs, and food banks long before it became normal. Few realize that the phrase, "all power to the people," wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Today, we call it activism. Back then, they called it survival. And here's the truth. The problems they faced haven't disappeared. Only the language has changed. Back then, the government ignored hungry children. Today, millions still go to school without breakfast. Back then, hospitals turned away the poor. Now, people go bankrupt paying medical bills. Back then, the Panthers begged for safe housing. Today, families live out of cars while luxury apartments stay empty. Different decade, same system. So ask yourself, who's really dangerous? The people who built hope with nothing, or the system that destroys it with everything? The state wanted the world to see them as criminals because it couldn't admit the truth. The Black Panthers were doing the government's job better than the government. They didn't overthrow America, they outperformed it, and that's what made them dangerous. By the early 1970s, the pressure was unbearable. Raids, arrests, and assassinations tore the movement apart. Huey Newton was jailed, Bobby Seale was silenced, and Fred Hampton, just 21 years old, was shot dead while sleeping beside his pregnant girlfriend. But the legacy didn't die, because you can't kill an idea that's already been seen. When you look at free school breakfast programs today, thank the Panthers. When you see community health clinics, thank the Panthers. When you hear about mutual aid, free legal aid, or neighborhood protection, that's their blueprint. They showed us what the hidden black government could look like, not about left or right, not about red or blue, but about people versus neglect. And here we are again. Rising prices, sky-high rent, medical debt, politicians calling it complicated while regular people are the ones solving it. You see it every day. Teachers buying their own supplies, volunteers building shelters for the homeless, communities raising money for medical bills online. That's the hidden black government still alive, in a new generation that refuses to wait for permission. So maybe the question isn't what happened to them. Maybe the question is what happened to us? Because the blueprint is still here. And the problems they faced are the same ones we scroll past every day. The government has had 50 years, billions in funding, and every kind of data. Yet children still go to school hungry. The Panthers did it with nothing but courage. So what's really the threat? The people who fed the poor, or the system that still lets them starve? The Black Panthers didn't just fight, they built, they taught, they healed. They showed that real power doesn't come from the top, it starts from the bottom. From every shared meal, every protest, every neighbor helping another, it always came back to the same three promises: food, healthcare, and freedom. That's the hidden black government, the one America tried to erase but couldn't. It was never just a movement, it was a model. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we build it again.